If you're like me and have a brother or sister, then chances are you've grown up having to share things. Maybe it's a toy, maybe it's a tablet, maybe it's clothes, or maybe you've even had to share the same space, like a bathroom or a bedroom. This was my experience. I never had any brothers, so I never had to share a bedroom, but I did have to share a bathroom with my younger sister. Now, it was pretty easy to divide things up. I had my half with my sink, she had her half with her sink, and we each had cabinets to put our stuff in. All in all, it was a pretty pleasant experience. That's not to say things were perfect though. Let's just say throwing a tube of toothpaste out of anger is probably not the best 5th grade thing you can do. Moving on. The reason I bring this up is because in today's video, we're going to be learning about the immediate effects that Great Britain, France, and the Native Americans all experienced after the French and Indian War. And a lot of it has to do with sharing space.
After the French and Indian War...
Actually, hold on. Let's just get France out of the picture here. After the war ended, they were basically gone. Okay, now moving on.
After the French and Indian War, many British settlers moved west. They built homes on the land that Great Britain had won from the French.
See what I mean? At this point, France was basically out of the picture and they really didn't have much to offer. And Great Britain now had so much land to work with that they didn't have beforehand. Imagine you're at a park. That's not a park. Imagine you're at a park. You have so much space to work with here. You're also 10 and 11 years old, and so you're smart enough and old enough to make the good decisions and to know where to go and what to do while you're at this park. It's all yours. But then your parents show up, and all of a sudden they say you can only go certain places in this park. Well, what gives? Let's wrap up this paragraph in the text before we move on and answer that question.
However, American Indians feared that this movement of people would destroy their way of life. Some American Indians tried to drive the settlers away by attacking their homes in the British forts. By the time this fighting ended, nearly 2,000 settlers, soldiers, and traders had died.
Okay, so here's what's going on. At this point in time, the colonists have been over in the New World long enough to where they start feeling a little more independent and a little more comfortable with being away from their home world. So much so that they sometimes forget who's actually in charge, and it's not them, it's Great Britain. Remember, this isn't modern times, and it's not like your parent is off on a business trip and you can just send them a text to communicate with them. Back in the 1700s, it took a long time to communicate with anybody, anywhere. Take a look at this map. Great Britain is way over here. Now, all the way over here, we have the New World. If I were to sail from the city of London, all the way to Boston in modern day, meaning right now, it would take about 3,000 to 3,500 miles. And doing the math here, that's roughly on a modern day boat about 10 days to do, so it's not horrible. It's a pretty manageable trip. But let's say I take the modern day boat away and instead I cross this same distance using a ship from the colonial era. Well, instead of 10 days, now my journey is going to take 28 days, which is just about a month. So if I wanted to send a message from here to here and then back again, that would take 1 month this way and another month this way, so by the time I hear back from the person I'm trying to communicate with, 2 months have gone by. That's a long time. All that to say is that the colonists were pretty comfortable, and the last thing they wanted to do was get communication from someone so far away. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to them anymore. And the colonists aren't the only ones not really enjoying this new way of life. Remember, this was called the French and Indian War, and the Native Americans also were struggling with this change too. They weren't too happy about these British colonists suddenly taking over their new land. So, like two siblings having to share one thing, they began fighting with each other. The good news here is that this fight didn't take 10 years like the last one, and it was over relatively quick. And the reason why it was so quick shows up in the next paragraph here. Let's read it.
To stop the attacks and to protect the colonists, Great Britain announced a law called the Proclamation of 1763. This proclamation declared that American Indians could have much of the land west of the Appalachian Mountains, and it also said that settlers could not move to these areas.
Take a look at this map here. As we can see, France all of a sudden really isn't a factor anymore. All they take up is this space down here in what's now present-day Haiti in the Dominican Republic. All of this yellow space is what Great Britain won from France. So it's a ton of space now to work with. But after fighting with the Native Americans here about who gets to settle here, Great Britain's king, King George III, had had enough. And he said, look, you guys, the Native Americans, can have this land over here, and you guys, the colonists, my people, will stay here in this land. See this shaded region right here. And this decision that King George made is what we call the Proclamation of 1763. And the definition of the word proclamation is an official announcement made to the public. In this proclamation, King George announced that all the Native Americans can be here and all the colonists can stay here. This red line here indicates the Proclamation of 1763. So really, if you look at all this yellow land, the Proclamation of 1763 actually limited where the colonists could end up staying. If you were a colonist, how would you feel about having all this land and only being able to stay here? Seems to me pretty unfair, and the colonists agreed. Observe.
The colonists disliked this law because they did not like the way in which Great Britain was trying to control the colonies. Many colonists simply ignored the law and moved west.
So this is what I was talking about in my park example earlier. You being old enough to make your own decisions and to know where to go and what to do, feel pretty good about yourself, but then your parents show up and say, no, you can't go there. This is how the colonists felt after King George made the Proclamation of 1763. So if you open up your history workbooks to page 62, you'll notice some boxes here, and we've got some more modern day examples of what the Proclamation of 1763 really was trying to do. If you don't have your workbook, then you can go back to Google Classroom, print this out, and then come back to this video, or you can just get a piece of binder paper and take notes the old-fashioned way. So go ahead and pause this video while you get your supplies ready. Okay, our first metaphor goes like this. The principal is concerned that some classes are getting into arguments on the playground. So in history, this is what the metaphor actually means. Great Britain, the principal, is concerned about fighting between American Indians and the colonists, meaning the two classes, in the territory west of the Appalachian Mountains, the playground. The metaphor then goes on to say, the principal says that your class can only stay on the basketball court during recess. In the real world, what this translates to is that Great Britain, the principal, orders colonists, your class, not to settle west of the Appalachian Mountains, meaning they can't go to the playground. They have to stay on the basketball court. Not much of this seems fair, does it? So for those of you keeping score at home, let's take a little tally here and see what's going on. Number 1, Great Britain wins the war, and they get a ton new land. Number 2, the British colonists naturally want to go live in that new land. Number 3, the Native Americans, who were there first, don't like that and begin fighting back the colonists. And number 4, King George III doesn't like this fighting and says, enough, here's a proclamation of 1763. It seems to me that the colonists are getting a little fed up with their homeland. And speaking of home, tune into tomorrow's video to see Great Britain do something yet again that the colonists don't like. Guys, that's going to do it for today's Daily Dose of History. Make sure you head back over to the Google Classroom, answer the question that's provided there, and if you haven't, make sure you copy these notes down. They're going to help us on our Friday discussion. And speaking of our Friday discussion, that's happening this week, so make sure you come prepared with something to offer to our group discussion. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait to talk to you guys on Friday, but in the meantime, I'll see you right here tomorrow.